I am Heidi Benjaminson, your host of Confidence Coaching, a podcast for mothers who want to stay calm and anchored during the teenage years. Life isn't a spectator sport. Success comes to those who show up every day with a pocket full of courage, grit, and a little sparkle. I'm glad you're here. Hello. Welcome to episode 165, Supporting Grieving Teens. I'm so glad you're here. I appreciate your patience as I get back into a rhythm of publishing episodes. I've had several trips, special events, things, and people that I've wanted to focus on. And y'all, I really try to practice what I preach. I'm not a fan of hustle, so even though I never missed a weekly podcast for 3 years, I've given myself grace this past year to focus on the most important things and people and events in my life. And honestly, let some people and listeners catch up on my episodes. Also, I really value your time. And if I'm not feeling the inspiration and flow for an episode, I choose rather to skip that week. I've had several other things going on behind the scenes in my business that you are going to hear more about. You're going to learn more about. This past year, I've taken and I'm still taking courses, certifications, deep diving into our nervous systems and learning more about our energy, about the things that make up our nonverbal communication. Because, like you've heard me talk about, our vibe attracts our tribe. We have our lane, other people have their lane, and there's a whole lot going on between our lanes. There's energy, there's our nervous system, and our vagus nerve work. I'm excited to teach you more about it and incorporate it with the cognitive coaching that I do. Next week, I'll be talking more about a signature 8-week program I'm about to launch, so stay tuned. Today, I want to talk about a subject that is very near and dear to my heart, about an emotion that we are all going to feel at some point if we let ourselves feel it, and that is grief. And I want to talk specifically about how to help our kids feel grief when they are experiencing it. This episode is about a year or two belated after a close friend asked me for tools to help her children process the loss and events around the death of a close mentor, member of their church, the father of a dear friend. She looked for episodes in here, and since there wasn't one, I sent her specific tips. I'm now finally putting everything together in an episode to help all of us learn how to help our children deal with grief in a mature and healthy manner. I looked up the definition of grief because it's good for us to know what we are helping our children with. One definition says, grief is the anguish experienced after a significant event, like the death of a loved one. Symptoms of grief could include psychological distress, separation anxiety, confusion, yearning, obsessive dwelling on the past, apprehension about the future, sharp sorrow, painful regret, and deep sadness. We can experience grief when there is any loss, but when a loved one, blood, or chosen family passes away or maybe moves away or even chooses to end a relationship, our kids are going to experience grief. I don't think we handle grief well in our happiness-seeking, pleasure-packing society. How many times do we see someone suffering and our default response is to tell them it will all work out, to look on the bright side, and so on? Our default brain thinks negative emotions are bad and that something has gone wrong. If we aren't intentional, we can think our teens' grief is something we need to solve for, something to help them avoid. I know for sure I have said unhelpful things to people as they're grieving solely because I wasn't comfortable with their discomfort. Or I felt some responsibility to make them feel better, since the world tells us that we should all feel better. So as you listen, recognize there's no shame in what we've said before. Well, we are all learning and getting better, and that is what matters. Instead of thinking we need to help our kids avoid grief, I want you to think of grief as something we want to help them face head on, to sit beside them as they feel it so they know they aren't alone and they aren't afraid of the emotion as it will inevitably come back in their life. Our goal is to make the feeling less scary, to even give them words to express how they feel, which is so hard, even for adults. So here are 5 tools and tips to consider when you one day need to help your children process grief. First, like I said, when we see our child feeling those grieving feelings, we want to acknowledge and validate what they are feeling. Say things like, I can see that you're feeling some deep feelings about Grandpa's passing. I am too. I really miss him. Or say, it seems like you're lonely after your best friend moved. I've been lonely too. It doesn't always feel great. By acknowledging the feelings, we help give our teens words and boundaries and structure to their emotions. When we name emotions, we can tame the emotions. We want them to know the way they are feeling is normal. Nothing has gone wrong. Feelings that are not validated will never be processed in a healthy way. The less we say is often better. Keep it simple. I'm sorry you're feeling those hard feelings. I hate that you didn't make the college soccer team also. Don't avoid these conversations. Face them head on. Looking away doesn't make pain go away. It just makes people feel lonely and increase their distress in the pain. Sit with the discomfort in your body that your child is distressed and remind yourself over and over, this emotion isn't something to fix. It's something for me to witness and hold with my child. This helps them get to the other side of the emotion faster. Second, the goal is to help them not feel alone. I've heard Dr. Becky Kennedy say that a lot. Our kids in grief may feel like they're sitting alone on a bench at recess. They just need us to sit on the grief bench with them so they don't feel alone. So when our kids bring up the person or the thing that they're grieving, be willing to talk about it. Ask and listen. Ask them what they're feeling. Ask them what they might be thinking before you make assumptions. Just today, I got a text from a young adult with news that I thought would bring her disappointment and sadness. I caught my initial assumptions and I checked them and simply replied to her text asking, "What do you think about this news? Tell me how you're feeling." She then replied with a response I wasn't even expecting, and it gave me insight into her fears and hopes in a way that I wouldn't have known if I had thrust on her what I thought she was feeling. Third, let your teens see you grieve, see you cry. Talk to them about what you miss, about the sadness you feel. Humanize these emotions for them. Let them know it is a strong person who cries. It is a strong person who will ask for help, who will show vulnerability. It takes courage to admit that we are affected by suffering and sadness in the world. Our kids desperately need adults in their life who model healthy processing of negative emotions. Our world offers quick fixes, food, drugs, alcohol, and more to numb from feeling bad. Let your kids see you feeling bad and not turning to those quick fixes. It doesn't mean you don't help your kids process and talk things over at an ice cream shop. Do things that just won't create more negative after the processing. Do things that you metaphorically are sitting with them on that bench to help them process the emotions. Once I helped a dear young daughter write a talk that she would deliver at her mother's funeral. We don't shy away from talking about our mom. We discuss the losses, the grief, which never go away. We can feel grief and still experience joy and happiness. Fourth, this is one I mentioned a bit earlier, but it really is so important. We can't tell people to feel better, to see the sunny side of a situation. When our teen is rejected from their dream college, they will be sad. They will grieve a future they thought they had. Sit with them, hug them. This is not the time to tell them how lucky they are to be accepted to the other colleges, or tell them all the things you suddenly don't like about that school. This feels very off to their nervous system that does not want to feel grateful or lucky. So they feel internal dissonance with what they're feeling and what they're being told they should feel. Our nervous system always knows. Most often, the less we say, the better. Acknowledge the pain. saying, I'm sorry for your loss, or I'm so sorry you're going through this, and nothing more. Let them talk when they're ready. I've shared before that this last year, as our daughter was processing the emotions of moving and her high school future looking different than she had planned a couple years ago, leaving lifelong friends, I didn't tell her that she was being ungrateful as she cried for all of the good that we had given her. We didn't tell her to look on the bright side. Ironically, by holding space for the negative, we all get to the quote bright side, or we get through the pain tunnel faster. I said a lot of, I'm so sorry, honey, to my daughter. Then I shut my mouth. I was considerate of her emotions, and I didn't make them wrong. When my friend was helping her sons handle the death of a close family friend, we discussed giving her sons the exact wording to say to their friend, to help them know they can simply look their friend in the eye who lost his dad and say, I'm so sorry. I miss your dad. I'm here for you. Our kids usually need to know what to say. Often they haven't experienced this. Saying something is always better than avoiding that person or saying nothing at all. Think of it as an energy exchange. My mother-in-law just passed away, and many people were telling us and my children at the funeral, I'm so sorry for your loss. I shared with my kids all they need to do and say in response is, thank you. I appreciate your words. They weren't sure what to say. We want to say things that are like us receiving that energy of condolence, not say things that reject it, like, well, she's in a better place. Just receive the message and energy by saying thank you. The people mourning and grieving want an exchange of energy. I've always regretted how I handled a situation a long time ago. A childhood friend of mine lost a small child of hers, and I sent a card, I'm sure as many people did. I remember writing something about a common belief of happiness and families that we both had. My friend lived across the country, and we didn't have contact other than Christmas cards at this time. Years later, my mom told me that my friend stopped participating in her church organization because it was too hard to go to a place where everyone wanted her to, quote, look on the bright side. And too few felt comfortable acknowledging and just sitting with her in her profound sadness. That compounded her sadness. Now that I know better, I write different messages and say different things to those grieving. It was a good lesson for me. Okay, fifth tip is to remember grief doesn't go in stages. It isn't linear. A large loss will not go away, usually ever. The goal isn't to have grief disappear. The goal is we learn to honor the feeling, the experiences, and give them their appropriate place. Medium and smaller losses probably will dissipate over time if they're processed in a healthy way. My daughter misses friends in Massachusetts and has created space for really good new friends. She loves her new school. Both the missing the old and enjoying the new can exist together. Holidays and life milestones will bring up bigger losses or the remembrance of them. If big emotions pop up from time to time, give your kids space to express what's going on. Ask them what they're feeling in their body. Look them in the eye. Hug them. Let them know it's okay. Don't tell them to feel better. Just meet them where they are. My own grief for losses goes in circles, can pop up at the most random times. I think of it as a small purse I carry on some days. I mentally see it as something I'll be carrying that day, but something I want in the back seat, not in the driving seat of my life. I've used examples of the death of loved ones here in this episode. It's important, and I've mentioned a few of these, that there is something called ambiguous loss that we all experience. These are losses that it's harder to quantify, which can make them harder to mourn and process. This could be anything from grieving the future you thought you'd have, the loss of a relationship, and the traditions and experiences with that person. Accidents and health problems can create ambiguous losses that we need to grieve. Just think of Olympic level athletes who don't make the team, grieving, maybe having children or grandchildren, or losing a career defining job. The more we can define the loss, the better it is for us to acknowledge and validate and handle the loss. Recognize these are all losses. These all hurt, even as our lives have space for the good. In closing, I want to reiterate what I said at the beginning. The goal of helping our teens process and sit in grief is so that they can recognize and process it when the emotions come up again in their life, which they will. The more we can help our kids understand life is going to be the entire pie plate of emotions, the good and the bad, the pretty and the ugly, and nothing has gone wrong when we experience the negative, the more prepared they are to handle these emotions in healthy ways. They'll know that they can come to us. They'll know we will sit with them and we won't leave them alone. They'll be less likely to turn to the unhealthy coping mechanisms available everywhere. And truly, the more we can sit with the uncomfortable emotions, the bigger our nervous system tolerance becomes and our comfort zone expands. That's it for this week. If you would like more calm and emotional control in your lane and in those around you, sign up for a free consult call at HeidiBenjaminson.com or DM me on social media. A confident mother is the greatest gift to her family, not a perfect mother. Our families want us to feel confident, anchored, and calm. I can help you uncover this version of yourself. Have a great week.